The 7 most powerful men in China hold the highest leadership roles within the ruling party, and their identities are revealed every 5 years at the meticulously organized political event known as the National Congress.
China's Communist Party unveiled its new leadership over the next 5 years.
The sequence in which they appear is symbolic. The first person to step out is designated as the party leader for the subsequent 5 years. At the most recent event, in October 2022, that individual was Xi Jinping, China's president for the past decade, who secured the top position for a historic third term. This was possible after he eliminated the presidential term limit that had constrained all his predecessors to 2 terms, signaling his potential plan to remain in power indefinitely. The world has not witnessed a Chinese leader with this level of authority since Mao Zedong, the revolutionary founder of the People's Republic of China, whose brutal dictatorship scarred generations of Chinese people. Xi has frequently been likened to Mao, and he clearly borrows tactics from Mao's political strategy. However, their connection runs deeper. When Xi was a boy, Mao destroyed his family's life. Despite being generations apart, their paths dramatically intersected, leading a teenage Xi from an elite family in Beijing into exile. He was condemned to hard labor in the remote countryside. 50 years later, Xi is among the most powerful political figures globally, and the only leader since Mao to wield unrestricted power over China. How did he transform from a banished youth to the absolute ruler of his nation? Xi Jinping's link to Mao began long before his birth. It dates back to the height of a bloody civil war in China. A faction of radical communist revolutionaries, including Mao, gained influence over vast areas of mainland China and controlled a military force called the Red Army, which battled the Nationalist Party, the Republic of China's ruling group. At this juncture, the communists were suffering heavy losses. Most of their forces were trapped here in a communist-held area originally established by Mao, now surrounded by nationalist forces. They were also running low on supplies. Consequently, the Red Army launched a daring offensive to breach the nationalist lines and evacuate the approximately 130,000 communist soldiers and civilians cornered there. On October 16, 1934, they executed their plan, attacking a weaker point in the enemy's defense. They broke through. Although their numbers rapidly dwindled, with thousands dying and many more scattering into the countryside, about 86,000 remained cohesive and pushed forward. This marked the beginning of the Long March, a historic year-long retreat intended to establish a new communist stronghold far from the nationalist armies. Mao, previously a military leader, was not in command at this time. He had championed guerrilla tactics, which had significantly influenced the Red Army earlier, but this approach had fallen out of favor, and he had been demoted. The Long March reversed his fortunes. After escaping the siege, the Red Army endured relentless attacks from the pursuing nationalist forces. The march's military commanders had favored a more conventional strategy of direct engagement over Mao's guerrilla methods, leading to catastrophic results for the Red Army. Less than half of the initial escape group survived the first 3 months alone. Therefore, at this initial regrouping point, Communist Party leader Zhou Enlai restored military leadership to Mao. Mao selected the march's final destination here, 800 miles away in rural northern China. They did not take the direct route. Mao guided the Red Army deep into the mountains, predicting lighter resistance there. He was correct. But the journey remained brutal. It involved 9 more months of continuous marching and fighting along a multi-thousand-mile route before they finally reached northern China, where a guerrilla base led by a communist revolutionary named Zhi Zhongjun offered Mao's army sanctuary, thus ending the Long March. That man was Xi Jinping's father. In the end, fewer than 8,000 of the original marchers survived. Despite the tens of thousands who perished on the Long March from combat, starvation, and disease, Mao's leadership was credited with saving the Red Army from utter defeat. He became the de facto head of the party and the military, entrusted with rebuilding the army to challenge the nationalist forces for total control of China. Wherever and however the Red troops move into battle, they spread the glory of Mao Zedong. This is an appropriate moment to explain how power operates within the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Officially, the Central Committee represents the highest authority, responsible for all major party policy decisions. Within the Central Committee is a smaller selective group of officials called the Politburo or Politburo. In most communist parties, like the former Soviet Unions, the Politburo contains the party's most powerful members after the General Secretary. However, the CCP has a crucial, unique feature. One more, even smaller, elite selection of top officials who wield the final authority. This elite class of Politburo members is called the Politburo Standing Committee. This group, which includes the General Secretary, holds ultimate command over the Central Committee, dictates the party's direction, and fully controls the Central Military Commission, or CMC, which oversees China's defense apparatus.
Mao's advancement during the Long March secured him a position here, at the highest level of the military and the Politburo Standing Committee. Although he was considered the party's de facto head after the Long March ended in 1935, he officially became the party leader in 1943. With both the military and the party under his control, Mao began to manipulate the system to ensure he remained in power for the rest of his life. At Mao's first National Congress as the official party leader in 1945, the party passed a resolution that dramatically increased his influence. They unified the party around a single version of its history and declared Mao's political doctrine, later known as Mao Zedong thought or Maoism, as the unquestioned guiding principle of the Chinese Communist Party. Essentially, no one could challenge Mao's ideas or policy decisions. It was here he revealed his contemporary equivalent of the Politburo Standing Committee, the four other top party leaders, all long marchers deeply loyal to Mao, like Liu Shaoqi and Zhou Enlai, who would later hold some of the most powerful positions in the future government. 4 years later, Mao proclaimed the final victory for the communists in the decades-long Chinese Civil War and established a new nation, the People's Republic of China, PRC. Mao Zedong, once a lowly party worker, now assumed the stature of a dominant figure in all of Eastern Asia. But winning a revolution is distinct from governing a country. Because once you are in charge of a nation, you have responsibilities like delivering mail and constructing infrastructure like dams. The party itself could not possibly handle all these tasks. Therefore, the party established a government structure to take the policy decisions made by the Politburo Standing Committee and implement them. The system evolved, as it is today, where the party, especially the Politburo Standing Committee, makes all the critical decisions. Many of these directives would then go to the State Council. The State Council was the highest executive body on the state side, led by the Premier of China. Notably, the Premier of China is almost always a member of the Politburo Standing Committee. One way Mao maintained absolute control over the years was by promoting his loyalists to top government and party positions, regardless of their administrative expertise. For instance, Zhou Enlai, the former party leader who helped Mao rise during the Long March, became China's first premier. The advantage was that they could never challenge him. The disadvantage was that they often lacked expertise, causing administration and policy outcomes to suffer. Long March survivors frequently became party elites under Mao. Xi Jinping's father, for example, was appointed Secretary General of the State Council, and as the son of a Long Marcher, young Xi was given the informal title of Princeling. Mao successfully retained his power throughout his lifetime. His unchecked policies resulted in massive famines and extensive persecutions, costing between 40 and 80 million lives over decades, culminating in the devastating Cultural Revolution. This was Mao's final, violent attempt to cement his power and enforce loyalty to Maoism, intending to make his ideas eternal, akin to figures like Marx and Lenin. Anyone who deviated from Mao's ideology was publicly disgraced, impoverished, socially ostracized, and often executed either by the military or by the militant youth group obsessed with enforcing Maoism, the Red Guards. With having consolidated his power beyond reason, Mao discontinued not just collective leadership and institutional procedures, but also every person who represented them.
Even those closest to the dictator were not safe from the purges of the Cultural Revolution. High-level officials, including members of the Politburo Standing Committee and Long March veterans, were removed from their posts. Liu Shaoqi was denounced as a traitor and died while imprisoned under horrific conditions. Mao also dismissed the army's chief of staff and replaced him with a Maoist loyalist, leaving no military figure to oppose him. Mao's designated successor, who always appeared faithfully by his side in propaganda, died under mysterious circumstances when his plane crashed while fleeing to the Soviet Union. Mao later denounced him as a traitor. He also denounced Xi's father. This photo shows Xi Sr. being physically restrained and publicly criticized by the Red Guards at the height of the Cultural Revolution. He would remain a prisoner in Beijing for 8 years following this incident. With his father purged, young Xi, then 15 years old, was expelled from his elite school in Beijing and sent to work in the countryside. He was forced to live in a cave and perform hard manual labor, receiving barely enough food for a teenager. Chairman Mao was responsible for all of it. But then Mao died. The Cultural Revolution ended. His successor was Deng Xiaoping, one of the Politburo Standing Committee members purged during the Cultural Revolution. Just before Mao died, Deng had begun promising fellow exiled party veterans that he intended to rehabilitate purged officials. Consequently, when Mao died, they all supported Deng's rehabilitation. As soon as Deng was restored to power, he proceeded to rehabilitate all these individuals. With experienced leadership back in place, the party needed to ensure such a period of unchecked dictatorship would never happen again. To dismantle Mao's cult of personality, the party introduced a second historical resolution in 1981. This resolution condemned the excesses of Mao's later rule and strongly emphasized a renewed commitment to collective leadership, vowing to oppose the consolidation of power around any single person going forward. Mao's successors did not desire a dictatorship. They deliberately divided the top positions among different people. Like Mao, Deng maintained firm control over the Central Military Commission as its chairman and held a leadership position in the government, but he never served as head of state, nor did he ever hold the highest position in the party. Instead, he created an advisory commission and served as its chairman, allowing him to influence the party's direction without occupying the top official post. This established a power-sharing structure, while Deng remained the de facto leader of China until he stepped down in 1989 following the army's massacre of students protesting in Tiananmen Square. Deng, in his ideology, which moved away from Maoism, created a precedent for shared authority. He opened up China and established economic relationships with these countries, becoming the first PRC leader to visit the U.S. in 1979. Today, we take another step in the historic normalization of relations which we have begun this year. Deng's reforms laid the groundwork for decades of economic growth that eventually resulted in China having the world's second largest economy and being on the cusp of becoming the next global superpower.
Communism is creating a consumer society. Also, remind you that the standard of living in China is going up. Here, capitalism rules.
One direct benefit of power sharing was the surge in policy innovation and a degree of decentralization, both of which hugely boosted China's economy. This period of economic reform and growth, lasting roughly 30 years, is known as the Deng era. Whether intentional or not, Deng honored his commitment and never attempted to consolidate absolute power. He truly shared authority, which established the framework for power sharing in the party, until the emergence of Xi Jinping. So what was Xi doing throughout this period? When Mao died in 1976, Xi was back in Beijing studying communist philosophy. Although the Chinese Communist Party had ruined his family, he had joined the party just as the Cultural Revolution was concluding. But why? While he may have personally resented Chairman Mao for the harm inflicted on his family, he likely recognized that in the Chinese Communist Party system, power is everything. Without power, one is nothing. To obtain that power, Xi made an unexpected move. He left Beijing. While his rivals fiercely competed against each other in the 1980s and 1990s, he deliberately avoided their path by moving to the provinces. He took leadership positions in poor, rural provinces across China, where there was little competition from other princelings. First, he served in Hebei, a poor, rural province near Beijing, where he easily rose to the top spot as party secretary. Then he went to Fujian, a highly militarized region housing top military officials. He advanced through the ranks there, becoming party secretary and then governor a few years later. After cultivating influential friends in the military, Xi moved here, again assuming the role of party secretary and building his civilian support base. This strategy of moving around not only gave Xi an advantage where competition was thin, but also earned him credibility as a humble, dedicated party leader. He fostered a growing network of supporters who would become crucial later. His last and shortest stop ultimately brought him back to Beijing. A brief period in the top party position in Shanghai in 2007, where he successfully repaired the city's image following a high-level corruption scandal. Xi established a reputation there as a cautious leader who strictly adhered to the party line. Just 7 months later, he finally returned to Beijing, promoted to the all-powerful Politburo Standing Committee. Essentially, the leaders who chose the next generation of top officials wanted a princeling, but one who was neither too strong nor too ambitious. Xi Jinping was perceived as less ambitious because he had been willing to work in lower-level positions in the countryside. When Xi appeared at the 2007 National Congress leadership unveiling, he was one of the country's 9 most powerful men. His strategic 17-year climb in the provinces had paid off massively. When the general secretary stepped down in 2012, Xi emerged in the top spot as China's leader. The elite son of a former revolutionary, turned exiled peasant, turned party favorite, was now poised to take complete control. Like Mao, Xi Jinping believes that unifying the party around a single figure is essential for its survival, rejecting the collective leadership that Deng's reforms had normalized. Almost immediately after taking power, Xi began removing rivals.
The news 4 top officials removed for taking bribes was announced on state TV.
Xi Jinping has just sacked his foreign minister.
He sacked a whole lot of other people at the top of the military establishment. The former security czar has not been seen in public for more than a year. The investigation against Zhou allows the Chinese president to remove those opposed to his reforms.
He launched a massive anti-corruption campaign in late 2012, early 2013, leading to the arrest of hundreds of senior officials and military officers. These purges targeted Xi's competitors within the party, whose vacant positions he quickly filled with his own loyalists. Following this extensive purge, Xi Jinping gained very tight control over both the party and the Chinese military, making him the most powerful leader of the CCP since Mao's death. This pattern continued in his second term, where he introduced 5 new faces to the Politburo, 3 of whom had close personal ties to him. In 2021, Xi executed one of his most significant moves to solidify his influence. He introduced a 3rd historic resolution that unified the party's ideology around one clear line of thinking: Xi Jinping thought. Xi Jinping's personal political doctrine would now become the core of the party's thinking, political stance, and actions. Essentially, Xi Jinping's ideas could no longer be challenged. And they weren't for many years. During Xi Jinping's first 10 years in power, the size of China's economy more than doubled. Average individual income and military spending also doubled. Under his leadership, China's international presence has expanded, positioning the rising superpower to act aggressively externally. This includes reasserting claims over parts of the South China Sea, intimidating Taiwan and Tibet, and dismantling democratic processes in Hong Kong. Within its borders, widespread strict internet censorship and surveillance are enforced, and the oppression of the Uyghurs, a mostly Muslim ethnic minority, is characterized by human rights abuses. But the COVID-19 pandemic introduced the first true challenge to his authority.
Anger in China is growing. Video showing protesters in Xinjiang fed up with China's zero COVID rules, the boldest public challenge yet for leader Xi Jinping.
Faced with nationwide protests and the party's reputation suffering, Xi reversed the failed policy. But he is now dealing with a fragile economy and cracks in his unchecked authority. Just weeks before the widespread protests at the 20th National Congress in 2022, Xi emerged in the leading position for a third time. He had already secured the presidency for another 5 years and unveiled a Politburo Standing Committee completely filled with his loyalists, having removed the final senior party members who had ties to his predecessor. Now, there is no one left in the party or military leadership whose ideology diverges from Xi's own. I believe no one can force him out now. I think Xi will remain the most powerful leader in China for as long as he is alive and conscious. Thanks so much for watching this episode of Atlas. So many teammates worked on this piece. A small army of editors, animators, and researchers helped bring this complicated story into focus. I especially like to shout out Raja, one of the key researchers on this piece, who conducted an incredible interview with our expert Victor Xi. It takes a lot of resources to make these videos, but we publish our work free to watch here because we think journalism should be accessible to everyone. If you believe in that too, please consider making a contribution. Thanks again.